Well, hello and welcome to Group One's second webinar of the year. I am David Graves, Group One Sales Representative, and with me today I have Chris Wilson, the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council's Communication Director, and we have a special guest today also from the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council, Leah Whitworth, who is the Council's HR Director.
Hello.
Hey, welcome, Leah. Hey, David, I got a pop cultural question for you. You ready?
All right, go ahead.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
What movie is that from?
I think that's The Wizard of Oz, is it not? And it goes kind of along with our slides, so it was kind of an easy hint.
That's exactly right. That's an old classic movie, and that line from that movie is what inspired the title of our presentation, Behind the Curtain, an HR Director's Perspective on Background Screening. Only it's not a man that we have behind the curtain, is it? It's a lady. It's Leah.
Yeah, we have Leah here today, and I want to thank both of you for being here today with me. Chris, it's great to have you here. How have you been?
I'm doing great, and I really appreciate your webinars, David. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of them, and it's kind of intimidating to be in the room here with these two incredible HR gurus.
Well, it's been a little while since our last webinar. I think it was February that we did our last one, but you've always done such a fantastic job getting things ready and prepared for these webinars, and thanks again for being here today and making things be set up so smoothly.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. I'm excited about the presentation today because after nearly 3.5 decades, actually 35 years to be exact, Jan Cavender, who was the previous HR director at the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council.
Yeah, she was here a long time. Wow.
Yeah, retired last year, and the council has since hired a new HR director, Leah Whitworth. And we invited Leah to be here today so that we could introduce her. And she'll be able to tell you more about herself here in a moment, but we thought it would be a great opportunity to interview her to see what her experience has been in ordering background screening and find out what type of challenges she had in the past when it came to background screening. Many in our audience, this may be a new process, background screening. For many of them, it's an old and familiar process, but a lot of times it's helpful to hear from someone else, another human resource professional, to see what their experiences have been and gain a little from their perspective and learn what we can from their experiences. So today, let me introduce you to Leah Whitworth, HR Director at the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council. Hello, Leah. How are you today?
Hello, I'm doing great, and I'm so happy to be here and really just looking forward to our presentation today.
Hey, I'm so glad you're here, Leah. Welcome aboard. It's great to be with you here today.
Thank you.
Well, today we have a very exciting presentation planned for our audience today. I'm excited to interview you, of course, Leah, and find out more about your experiences and, of course, get to know you better. But could you tell everyone a little bit more about yourself? You know, where did you work previously and what you're doing now here at the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council?
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I started in HR about 16 years ago. So not to age myself, but I'm totally going to be aging myself here. Fun fact, I was born between Generation X and the Millennials. I'm actually in a fun little micro generation referred to as Xennials.
Xennial?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but...
David, what are you, Generation X?
Well, I won't tell you when I was born, but I don't know if I'm an X, Y, or a Z.
Well, I'm a baby boomer. I'm old enough to remember my dad bought my family our first color TV, so I guess I aged myself there.
Oh, okay.
My goodness. Yeah, I know. Isn't it great? There's so many different generations in the workforce now. I think it's great. But yeah, so I started in HR 16 years ago, and I honestly did not say, "Oh, I'm going to grow up and be in HR." And I'm not sure if anybody in HR really has that path or not. Maybe now more so than when I started. But I was literally thrown into an HR department of one situation for a call center environment. And honestly, I'm so grateful for that opportunity. and what it did to help me grow and just get to where I am today. And then after that experience, I worked about 8 years in the oil and gas industry. And that was, also so much fun. I really, enjoyed working in that industry. And then prior to my role here at the council, I was working as an HR consultant where I had several clients in various industries all across the United States. And so now at the council, I'm the director of HR, and I really do enjoy the nonprofit piece to our organization. We just have a great group here, and it's an honor just to be a part of this organization.
Well, we're so glad to have you here. And just so some of our audience understands also, I keep saying the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council, which is also connected to GroupOne background screening. So the council, Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council, is the nonprofit side of the business, and then GroupOne background screening, which came about helping background screening for a lot of the hospitals and healthcare throughout the years, just so people kind of know what that relationship is. Well, I am looking forward to getting to learn more about you, Leah, and learning a little bit more about what your thoughts are on background screening.
Yeah, so generally when people think of background checks, it's a formality, right? Like just to check a box. And that's true. It is. Like it's very important to have the background screening. But since I've had the unique opportunity, when I was first in HR, I built, the call center HR department from the ground up. And I learned firsthand how impactful a single background check can be, good or bad. And it really is, one of the most pivotal moments in the background check process. It's meant to protect your organization, your employees, your customers, and even the candidates themselves.
Very good. Well, before I forget,
you don't want to forget this, David.
Before I forget, we always want to make sure that we share a disclaimer with our audience as far as a legal disclaimer. And that is, I wanted to preface this webinar by saying that we are not attorneys unless, Chris, you have been studying and have taken your bar exam.
No, sir, I have not passed the bar exam. I do have a joke for you. How many lawyers does it take to change a light bulb?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Go ahead.
It takes 3, one to climb the ladder, one to fall off the ladder, and the one to sue the ladder company.
Very nice.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't know we were going to have an attorney joke. That's very, very well prepared. The information and opinions expressed today are for educational purposes only and are based on current practice, industry-related knowledge, and business expertise. The information shall not be construed as legal advice expressed or implied. You should always consult your legal counsel when it comes to background screening compliance issues. So just wanted to get that up and out of the way. All right.
Here we go.
All right, so we're going to start and just kind of do this kind of as an interview. I'm going to interview with you. So first of all, Leah, tell me, can you share your first experience when you ordered your very, very first background check?
Yeah, so that was when, I was thrown to the wolves of HR, and I worked it was a mortgage collections company. So we actually pulled credit reports to ensure that our collectors weren't delinquent on their own mortgages. And I remember thinking, wow, like this feels invasive, and I could see all their information, and it's like, do we really need this? But over time, I saw how, an employee's own financial instability could lead to risky behaviors with our customer accounts. And also too, like our clients had certain requirements too, where, we had to check their box that says, they can, they didn't have any mortgages themselves that were delinquent. So, so that was, kind of my first experience was, I feel like I had to learn a lot of things, trial by fire, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like it's just a process when you're new into HR. Sometimes you have to like go through things to learn. And so, yeah, that was just my first experience in ordering a background check.
What was your first initial impression of the process, and kind of what was your process?
Yeah, so at first I didn't truly fully grasp the weight of it, right? Because as an HR department of one, I'm doing everything from payroll to recruiting to, employee relations and all the strategic things. And so, I was trying to hire people and get seats filled. And then I had managers, breathing down my neck, like, we need 5 people to start Monday. And so I didn't really understand the importance until, you have that one incident that happens and you get burned, right? So this truly is dependent on, the industry that you're in. And, in hindsight, you hear these stories, on TV where that's just the first thing that people check. It's like if something goes wrong, it's like, well, did you do a background check? And if you don't have that box check that you did a background check and it came back clear, like these things can come back.
It's kind of funny that everybody gets all important and get all up and excited about a background check when something goes wrong, but they don't always pay as much attention to the background checks at the very beginning, which is when they should.
I know, yeah, and I sort of had to learn that the hard way. So if anybody's listening, just don't let managers or anybody talk you into, hiring somebody before the background check is completely done. But my first impression of the process, though, going back to your question, is that, defining what is and what is not acceptable in your organization in terms of like what you can and can't hire. So in terms of like the red flags that come back, right? So sometimes I felt like my first agenda was to tackle this because, I was going to the VP and it's like, okay, well, this came back on this person. Like we were having whole meetings about, background checks, and it's like, we need a process. Like, so that way I don't have to come to you and we have to go through, this whole song and dance. Like, let's have a process. And then that way, I don't have to ask you every time a background comes back, and I know like what's acceptable, what's not. And eventually we had clients that we serviced that had stricter rules than we did. So we just kind of made that like the playing field, if you will.
Did you feel like your process over time kind of evolved a little bit? Did it change?
So this is a tricky question because, you want to be black and white and say, yes, we have a process and here's our industry. And I know we have a lot of, people in the healthcare industry online right now. And so you don't have as much flexibility when it comes to, patient safety. But, I feel like I became more rigid just because when you get burned and you have like, where you have to have those uncomfortable conversations with candidates where something did come back and maybe you hired them too soon.
Right.
So in that aspect, like I do think you need to be black and white, but over time, and this truly is dependent on the industry that you're in, I do embrace second chance hiring when it's appropriate, especially when someone shows genuine growth and accountability. And again, like I know like patient safety, if you have drivers, those kinds of things can be non-negotiable, especially if you're, regulated by the Department of Labor, things like that, or Department of Transportation, sorry.
Right, DOT.
Yeah, so.
The DOT.
Yes. So I will say, I have had experience where, one candidate once disclosed they had a 10-year-old, marijuana possession, right? And that was even before I even ran the check.
Okay.
And I just felt like, and that was when we did interviews one-on-one in person, right? Back then, I know there's different, a lot of phone interviews and different things like that. But that honesty of that candidate built trust, and it ended up being a non-issue, but it just reminded me that transparency is a strength. And sometimes too, like being an HR department of one, I lean on the resources around me, right? Like, your background screening company or your payroll provider or whatnot. And so, and some of the industries that I've been in, like in the oil and gas, it was like, okay, we need to cut costs, and what can be a cost saver for the organization, and can we, cut costs on background screening? Where can we save money? But everything truly comes down to service, in my opinion, and who you can rely on to have people in your corner to help you make company decisions. So in terms of like evolving over time, it was like I had to go through this cycle of like learning. And so that's what I'm hoping to bring to people today, is just my experience, and just, not make the same mistakes that I did, and just make sure you have, everything in place beforehand.
Very
so
good.
I think I'm ever evolving,
I think we all are. Let's move on to the next section here, and we're going to talk about decision making. What type of background check findings have most influenced your hiring decisions?
So yeah, I think the most impactful findings, obviously everybody wants, a green check mark background, clear background. But I think, when reviewing background checks, the things that suggest dishonesty or pose risk to vulnerable populations, like theft, violence, or falsifying credentials, those are the type of things I think you really, need to look out for.
Okay. How do you balance a candidate's qualifications with red flags in their reports? And what I mean by red flag is like a hit or something like that you might see on their report.
I know, and this is truly the hardest part of HR, because, we're trying to protect the company, but also, we have a heart, right? Like, we're people too. And so I've seen incredible candidates come through, like back in my heavy recruiting days, that have blemishes on their record. And it's like, oh man, I was like really rooting for you, but, we just can't hire you because of this or that, or, but honestly though, I do embrace second chance hiring where it's appropriate, right? Depending on your organization. And I've learned you must look at context, recency of the, red flag and the severity, and is there evidence of change?
Most importantly, I find like a lot of times HR people don't have policies written down and in place, which makes it so much easier to make decisions when you have a policy that's already in place. That helps define who you can hire or what's acceptable or not.
The consistency that's necessary.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And it sets a precedent too on future hires, right? So
true.
You have to be very consistent.
Have you ever had to make a tough call based on a background check? And if you did, what'd you learn from it?
Yes, I've absolutely have had to make some tough calls. I do have one situation that stands out, because it truly tested how we balance empathy, risk, and compliance. And like you said, it is so important to have a policy on what is and what is not allowed. And I know it's very helpful to have very black and white rules, and where there's no room for interpretation on what is not allowed. But I do have an experience that's on the other end of the spectrum I would like to share.
Oh, yeah, please do.
It was regarding a client that I have that, when I was in my HR consulting role. And so my client had a candidate who had excellent qualifications. They interviewed exceptionally well. And during the background check process, they made her an offer, but several misdemeanor charges came up, including a DUI, a domestic related harassment charge, and obstruction of a first responder even.
Wow.
I know. All were non-injury, but they had all occurred over a small span of time, right? But some were relatively recent. And the candidate was very upfront and transparent about her history. She wrote a long letter to, the CFO, and he gave it to me, and she explained that these incidents happened during an incredibly stressful period when she was going through, a very contentious divorce, and had lost her job, had to close her business because of COVID. And
wow.
And she, expressed that she had just completed counseling and probation, and there had been no further incidents. And so the CFO felt very strongly that we should move forward with her and give her a chance based on her skill set and honesty. And so I was put in a very tough position in my HR consulting role because, I have to protect my client and say, hey, like these are all the things, like if we do this, then this might happen, this might, and because I was hesitant because of both the recency and the pattern of charges and the potential risk to the organization and reputation and safety and just all the things, right? And so ultimately what I learned from that experience was that transparency matters.
Right.
Her openness about her record created a space for dialogue rather than surprises. And then context is everything. So understanding the why behind charges helps inform whether someone has truly changed. And I do remember when I went through this situation, I did have to reach out to the background screening company to ask for guidance on, certain things that I wasn't sure of what meant, or, and I had to reach out to them to assist me with some things. So that was very helpful to have that, go-to person. And then, compliance obviously is very important to any organization, and because HR is on the front line of that. But even if you're moved by someone's stories, you do have to weigh objective factors, recency, severity, relevance to the role. And I can't express enough, industry specific, right? Like if you have drivers or whatever, obviously that's a different ballgame. But if dependent on your, industry, I think you can determine whether the risk can be reasonably mitigated. And cannot stress enough, document your process. So we carefully documented the rationale in this situation in our discussions, and in the final decision to ensure that we were consistent with policy and fair employment practices. So the client took on the risk, but they did hire, the individual.
How did it work out?
Yeah, so in the end, it wasn't an easy decision. It required collaboration between leadership and HR, clear documentations, and a lot of thoughtful discussion about risk tolerance and second chances. And I think that's exactly why strong policies and processes are so important, because it guides you where emotions and values intersect, right?
Wow, that would have been a really tough decision, David. It's just a great example as to how complex this work is.
Absolutely. So did the person end up working out?
Yes, the person worked out and there were no issues. And
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great story.
Yes.
Let's move on to our next topic here. We're talking about compliance and risk management. How do you ensure compliance with FCRA and other relevant laws? Now, FCRA is Fair Credit Reporting Act, and as a CRA or a consumer reporting agency, as GroupOne background screening is, we fall underneath the guidelines of the FCRA. All that being said, how do you ensure compliance to make sure that you're compliant with FCRA and other laws like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's, three key factors to keep, or three key things to keep in mind with FCRA. You want to make sure you have the candidate's consent to run the background before you actually run the background, right?
Right.
And then actually there's four things. You want to, I think, first, make the offer of employment contingent upon successful completion of the background check. Like that's kind of like a standard saying in HR, like all offers are contingent upon successful completion of a background check, when you're in recruiting, like you say that all the time. And then you want to have their consents to run the background check. Should something come back and with the discrepancy and you're unable to move forward, you would then provide the applicants, the candidate, or, a pre-adverse action notice. And that's a letter that says, hey, some hits came on your report, and it even provides the candidates a copy of the report. And then the candidate has an opportunity to dispute the charges, right? So this is again where you would lean on your background screening company, or where I would, and then if some time goes by, like sometimes, I've had situations where it is truly something wrong. But if it is something that, isn't fixable or whatnot, then you proceed with the adverse action notice. And you just want to make sure that candidates have the opportunity to dispute any inaccuracies.
David, I do blogs for Group One, and there's barely a week that goes by where I don't read about a company being fined for making mistakes with this process.
Yeah, it's a very, very important process, and if it's not handled properly, it sure can get you in legal hot water, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes.
One of the nice things too, and I just might throw this out, I don't know, when you were doing the adverse action letters and also the consents to say for the candidate to say it was okay to do a background check, I don't know if you were doing that process manually or not, but one of the nice things in the Group One background screening system is when you send out a quick invite, we call it, it automatically automates that entire process so that you're not having to actually get a pen to paper and have them sign that authorization, but rather it's all
awesome.
handled automatically inside the Group One system, which most of our clients just love that because it takes away you having to
The
track down
burden,
and get all those signatures, wet signatures from the candidates.
Yes, I love that. That's any time saving tips and people is very valuable.
For sure. And same thing with the pre-adverse action. We also have a tool inside the Group One system that will generate the pre-adverse letter and also the adverse action letter as well.
That's very handy.
Let's go to the next section here, which is going to be about the candidate experience. How do you communicate the background check process to the candidates, Leah?
Yeah, so during the recruiting process, kind of give them an overview of what that might look like. And then once you get to the offer stage, hey, like this offer is contingent upon successful completion of a background check. And you communicate the process, right? Just, let them know what it is you're screening for. I always tell candidates up front, we use background checks to ensure a safe and trustworthy workplace. We'll walk you through the process and you'll have a chance to review any findings. And I just think transparency builds confidence. So I just think it's really important to communicate the process.
I think that's great that you let them know about that up front in the process. A lot of times people, if you're a recruiter or an HR talent acquisition, you just think it's a check mark off the list, to do a background check, but letting them know that we're trying to protect our culture, that we're trying to keep and make sure that we have a safe environment, not only for our employees, but also for, in the instance of hospitals and healthcare, that we're also ensuring the safety of the patients as well. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that you were upfront and being transparent about the reason for a background check.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever tried, or have you ever had a candidate challenge your background screen results? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah, I actually have, and it did end up being a legitimate mistake. So they had a candidate or employee with a theft charge, and she told me it was a mistake. And so I went through the process, and of pre-adverse action. And then she disputed it with the agency. I worked with the agency that reported it. And then I don't really know what magic they did behind the scenes or whatnot, but she worked it out with them, and they, gave me the green light. And so her background was completed and in good standing. So, these things do happen, right? Where, so if you have somebody challenge it, I would obviously go through the process. Like that's why those guidelines are there, right, to protect the employee and your company as well. So just make sure you follow those guidelines.
And it's also nice when you have a background screening company as well to kind of help you along that dispute process when they challenge the results. You can refer them to your background screening company, or you should be able to refer them to your background screening company where They can obtain a copy of the report if they've got something that they disagree with.
Yeah.
They, as a consumer, should have every right to be able to, dispute those results and work with the background screening company to get that corrected if it needs to be corrected. But all that process can be handled with your background screening company.
And I think it's important, like I always found value in talking to like a live person, so, because, there's different types of background screening companies out there. And
That's GroupOne's area of expertise.
I know,
Talking to live
yeah,
people.
that's what I'm kind of learning, joining the organization is that, we have a great, background screening company where, everybody is licensed private investigators.
That's right, licensed through the state of Texas as private investigators.
Yep. So that's great to know that like our HR people or our clients, have someone to go to, because I know I found a lot of value in that, because that's the worst when feel like you're so alone in HR, you don't have anybody to bounce things off of, right?
Right. Did you ever have instances where maybe the candidates were nervous about background checks, or that they knew a background check was going to be run on them and they maybe were nervous about it?
Yeah, and I think too, going back to like the different generations in the workplace, I think the newer generation, is that the right way to say it? You have to kind of teach them things too, right? And so I would just encourage any candidates who are nervous just to ask questions and educate yourself. And, it's okay to ask in the hiring process, what all are you checking for? And the candidate can even say like, obviously I'm not trying to hide anything. I just, want to learn about the process. And I think there's a lot of like initiative when, like, if I had a candidate come to me and just say, hey, I just want to know all about the process, like I would kind of be like, oh yeah, no, I appreciate that. Like we check, credit, we check, Social Security and county and whatever,
Right.
So yeah, I just think be honest, ask questions, and I think employers do appreciate honesty far more than surprises.
Very good.
Yeah, you can never go wrong with honesty.
Let's
Honesty
go to
is the best policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go to the next section here, which is best practices and lessons learned. Leah, what are your top 3 tips that you would give to HR professionals when it comes to background checks?
Yes, top 3 tips. So have defined policies and define what may be a deal breaker for the company if something comes back on record. So for example, a DUI may not be overlooked for a driver position, but maybe overlooked for an admin position. Make sure you have all of that squared away. And then number 2, I would say, don't ever start someone pending the results of the background check. And I have learned this the hard way. Make sure the background is received first with no exceptions. And some screenings take longer than others, depending on where all, the candidate has lived. So if that's the case, make sure you prep your managers, and in case that happens and start dates need to be delayed. And don't let your managers talk you into, I don't care if, so-and-so is training so-and-so. These things have to be done for a certain reason.
Trying to get them in for orientation,
Yes.
and it starts on Monday or
Right.
whatever, and
Yeah.
here we are Thursday or
It's okay
Friday.
to push them back, like it will not hurt. Like,
Yeah.
It's better to be safe than sorry. And then finally, if you decide not to move forward with a candidate, just make sure that you are sending obviously the pre-adverse action notices before you rescind an offer of employment. Again, that's that compliance piece, and that's where, it can really get the company in trouble if you don't follow those steps. So before going back to an employee and a candidate saying that, I can't make you an offer of employment because, this came back, make sure you've gone through the pre-adverse action and adverse action notices.
Great. Leah, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your HR professional experiences. I think we've all learned a lot from that.
Yeah, she
I'm
knows
so
her
happy
stuff,
to be here. This has been great.
That's awesome. I think we have time now for some questions.
Actually, we do have time.
Let's see if we can take some questions.
Let me
from
see what
the
we have
audience.
here. Okay, here's a question. Is it okay to order a background check? Is it okay to order background checks annually on your employees?
Oh, that's a good one.
That is a great question, and absolutely the answer is yes. For sure you can, and I'm actually impressed for somebody to ask that question because it's probably the most often overlooked because a lot of times we run a background check on somebody when they come on board, right? But we don't run a background check on them a year or two later. And this is crucially important, especially with a lot of our clients that are healthcare or hospitals, that they may be working with patients. Maybe they didn't have something on their record when they came through the door, but they may certainly have something, a DWI or something worse that may be on their background check. So definitely encourage people to run a background check annually. By the way, if you're not doing that already and you need to do that, you can save and have cost savings to that if you'll reach back to us as GroupOne background screening, because we can give you a discounted price for a recheck versus running a background check, just paying your full normal background check price.
Oh, that's nice.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Now, if they don't run rechecks and they have an employee that does get arrested for something and that's not found out, can the company get into trouble for that?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. And that's the reason why you want to do the recheck is because obviously you may not know something's on there, but that's really no excuse to be negligent. You should be running rechecks, especially in those positions that are critical. If it's patient safety or maybe it's a first responders, making sure that what's going on with them even after they've been employed is crucially important.
And obviously, I think it's important to note that you have to have a policy for that, right? And make sure that's communicated in the new hire onboarding process, where it's like, hey, just a heads up, we run annual background screenings. And then also too on, the form or whatever, the pre-authorization, make sure it says in there that you run it annually and the employee signs off on that.
So you have to be consistent. You can't do it on some employees and not on others.
Correct.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, you do have to be consistent.
And typically, even in our authorization, our default authorization that we use at GroupOne, we specifically say that you're signing off on a background check for employment, pre-employment, and then also for post-employment purposes as well, just to cover.
Yep, there you go.
I got another question here. This is a pretty good one. What do I do if the candidate asks for a copy of their background check?
That's a great question there. And typically what we would do at GroupOne background screening, well, number one, let me say this also. There is no reason why you also, as an HR professional, if you've got access, and you do have access to the background check, you're welcome to be transparent and share a background check with that candidate. They have every right to be able to see what's on that background check. Now, some HR professionals don't feel comfortable giving that report to them, especially if there's something on there that may cause some confrontation with the HR professional, and I totally get that and understand that. So you can always refer them back to us, GroupOne background screening, where we can get them a copy of that background check. And as mentioned before when we were talking earlier, if they have a dispute or something is they feel incorrect about that report, they have every right to dispute that, and we have a whole team and department that handles the dispute processes. So I think that answers your question there.
Absolutely does. Thank you, David. Thank you for answering that question. Here's another question. When should I place the background check order? Before making a job offer or after?
Yeah, and I think Leah talked about this a little bit earlier, it should always be placed as a...
all offers are contingent upon successful completion of a background check.
Post offer is the way that we would say it. So you run a background check post offer. Interestingly enough, and I worked 20 years as an HR generalist prior to coming to GroupOne background screening. But in one of those stints, I worked for a staffing company early on in my career, so I didn't probably know better. I guess I'll use that as my excuse. But the company had taken so many applications as a staffing company, and we ran background checks on every single person that came through, and it was almost used as a way to kind of filter through people. Well, obviously, I know now later on in my career that is, I know, right? That is just not the way you do it. But believe me, there are lots of HR people that don't know about it either.
Yes,
and so they're doing them pre-offer. Running background checks, and so that could be part of once upon a time we did a HR horror stories. That could have been the horror story for sure.
Classic webinar that we did.
That's right.
Oh, okay. I got
Any
another
more questions?
here. I
Got a
do.
few more minutes.
We got one final question. We have a release on our application. We have a release on our applications. Is this good enough to notify the candidate of their rights under the FCRA and to provide their consent for a background check?
Yeah, many times I know HR professionals sometimes will have on their actual application something, it says on the application that we pull a background check, and it's almost like an authorization that's actually on the application itself. I would say probably not a best practice. I would think that most HR professionals would tell you as a best practice, it'd be better to have that as a separate agreement. If it ever were, and I'm not an attorney, remember we're not attorneys, but if it were ever to go to court of law, a judge would probably say that's too confusing and too much information to have them fill out an application and sign off on a release during the application process. Rather, it'd be better to have that to be a separate form, an authorized disclosure form, to have them sign off separately saying it's okay to run a background check on me for this purpose and for this reason of pre-employment. So better to do that actually as a separate than leaving it just on the application.
Yeah, no harm in over communicating.
Absolutely.
What a great webinar, David. My gosh. And Leah, we so much appreciate you being here.
Yes, this has been so great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
We have our contact information up there.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or, ever needs any support, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help where I can or provide resources to get what you need.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and David too. David's contact information is up there, and he's also the expert in-house, and he's certainly someone to help you should you have any questions.
Great. Thank you, Chris, again for all your organization and putting this together today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
And thank you, Leah. And
yes.
We're going to end our webinar. We appreciate everyone being here, and thank you so much, and have a great afternoon.